Society is set up in a certain manner, and I don't just mean in India. In most parts of the world, there is a certain construct that parents, teachers, either subtly or very consciously and deliberately advise children and students to follow. Qualify yourself as well as possible, and you will get that dream job, and that will lead you to your dream partner, and then you will have your dream home, and then you will have your dream children, yada, yada, yada. A lot of us, therefore, spend copious amounts of time and effort chasing that construct. And when I came across our guest today, having achieved most of that construct very successfully, and then choosing voluntarily to forsake it and chart out her own completely different life path, which is not to say she took sannyas or left all the moh-jal of this world, but chose instead to perhaps approach life with a slightly different purpose in mind, use her talents and qualifications in a slightly different area. To me, that struck me as extremely courageous, brave, and in many ways, what perhaps will develop eventually, in her case, a wonderful example of whatever term you want to give it. Empathetic capitalism, soft capitalism. I'm not an economist, so I can't say. And so when I first came across Poorvi, and she was doing these wonderful videos and reels talking about things relating to one's self-worth, mental health. I saw them as incredibly refreshing. These kinds of topics and themes can become quickly dense and serious, but there was an authenticity and a lightness to her disposition and her content. I reached out to her, and I was absolutely subsequently blown away when I learned of her story and what she has come out through quite recently. So, after that convoluted and slightly mysterious introduction, we are calling this session Trauma Tested. This is Talk Therapy brought to you by Driveway Devi, and I'm Karthik on behalf of Driveway Devi, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Poorvi and thank her for making the time.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Wow, what an introduction. Something I'd not expected, but thank you so much for having me here. I've been following some of the work that you're doing along with your wife. Truly commendable, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
You're very kind. Share a little bit, however much you're comfortable sharing, in terms of a very specific and fairly recent development in your life that really, really, and perhaps for the first time in these kinds of ways and degrees, tested your resilience and well being.
Yeah, we've had a conversation. I exactly know what you're talking about. And this is for the world to know. I have made sufficient and enough and more videos on the topic, but when things hit you and they hit you hard, it's often something that you least expect at that moment. Morning of January 27, 2022 was when I was on a Teams call, 8:30 in the morning, when I heard my mom screech and shout from the other room, and that's when I realized that something is not okay with my dad. I ran. I realized that he's been taken to a hospital, but we knew little about what's happened. We just saw a photograph. Rushed there. I remember running barefoot everywhere. I rushed to the hospital. And, from the corridor, from one end of the corridor, I saw my papa yawning a very different way. And if you've spent enough time in a neuro ICU, and I hope nobody does and nobody has to, but I had done it for my grandmother. So seeing my dad yawn in a way that a neuro patient would, it's a very peculiar sight. I knew life has changed. I knew that my very beautiful family of three people, me and my mom and dad, um, is not the same. I could process very little at that moment, but long story short, Papa developed something called, not developed, he met with an accident and he got something called an EDH, that's extradural hematoma. And a lot of blood had oozed into his brain. And for those who understand, brain, when you touch it, it's soft like butter. And the moment it comes in contact with blood, um, in a very layman term, it starts to dissolve. And it had happened to one side of his head, and there was also a midline shift, which meant that Papa was not the same person anymore. Um, of course, these were things that I did not know. These were things I learned during the journey. And I was 1 year into my corporate job. I'm an engineer. I went and did my MBA, and I was working with a very nice organization at that time. They were very supportive. And what I realized was that a 5 lakh, 10 lakh health insurance plan means nothing when something like this happens, right? Yeah, so many things led to me ending up getting about 6 neurosurgeries done to Papa in the first 3 days, exhausting everything that I had saved up in my 1 year of corporate journey alongside the insurance. A lot happened. Maybe during the course of this conversation, I'll be able to talk about all of that more in depth. But I think this grief was something that came to me in ways that I don't know how to put it, but I think, when there's grief for most people, that's what I had observed. You lose people, you know. But in my case, I saw my father wither away. For that 1 year that he was in coma, I saw him go from 75 kilos to 35 kilos. I saw his hair change. I saw his face change. I saw a lot of involuntary things that you would do if you're a neuro patient. So I saw a lot of things that I think affected me in ways that will show up even today. And yeah, I think that was when I realized that something's not right with me dealing with this. It's been 3 years now. I have developed autoimmune illnesses. My doctor tells me it's all stress related.
Yep.
I've tried therapy. I've done everything, but I think that was that one life altering incident that happened, which kind of brought this itch in me that, I need to do something for people like me, for other people who are suffering in big and small ways all around the country.
Hmm. Wow. There are lots of thoughts, but I think it's important that I mention some allied information. I usually don't because it doesn't really add any value. But in this case, it's in context and it builds an important context. Of course, you mentioned, but I'd like to reiterate that you're the only child. Also, that you're very modest. So you did your engineering, and then, of course, you did your MBA at an extremely reputed college, and you won various awards there. Um, and Not just the fact that you're the only child. I mean, it so happens that you are one of those families that is extremely, extremely tightly knit. Of course, that has its own bearing. And so I just wanted to mention those things very quickly, that the fact that you were in a corporate role, that corporate role was very good considering it was at the beginning of your career, but of course, as you consequently found out that it was woefully inadequate because once a human being is wheeled into any medical facility, God forbid, we all know what happens in terms of just finances. And I want to also underscore to people who are watching and listening that this actually cannot be called an event, because something that leads to, and in this case Poorvi's father being in coma for a year, that's not an event. That is a present continuous that becomes your day in and day out reality, and a reality that becomes more and more complex and challenging day by day. So I can only imagine and can't possibly fathom the kind of testing times they were in every which way. But the human spirit and the human condition are fascinating, because we somehow seem to survive the most seemingly insurmountable circumstances and situations. Of course, we come out battered and beaten at the other end, but we survive somehow. And I want to ask you that during this entire phase, while you would have presumably had no conscious sense of, oh my god, I'm so stressed, and oh my god, let me go for a run, and oh my god, let me sort of try and reinstate my own mental wellness. uh, was there anything or anyone that was a point of solace or a safe space for you?
Karthik, I think that happened to me in multiple phases with different people. I cannot point my finger at one person or one therapist or one activity that helped.
No, that's
Um,
fine. Even if you were to say that, my close group of friends really rallied around me, that would help.
yeah. No, I'd like to actually mention that my then manager at my organization, which is where I ran first to get a personal loan, right? Actually sat me down with an entire calculation of what life is going to look like post what has happened. Because 4 days, 3 days into it, I could process very little, right? His father, unfortunately, also met with had a stroke and he was bedridden. So he understood the realities of what happens when somebody slips into a coma, right? He denied, not denied, but then he suggested against a personal loan. My cousin, my Masi's daughter. I always speak of how I don't have a sibling, but when I think of that one little girl, I realize that, if this is not a sibling, who is? I've seen her do more than what my sibling could have done if I had one,
Hmm.
right? She and a then friend, these three came together. They started a fundraiser for my father. Uh, and the amount of love that kept pouring in, because obviously when something like this happens in your life, and you never would you wake up one morning and think that life will bring me in a place where not only am I trying to process the fact that is my papa going to make it, but at the same time realizing, has it come down to this, that am I having to raise money to provide for my father? But then, thanks to the banking systems, that I could not even get into his accounts. The house that's in his name and we wanted to sell, we couldn't. There was, it was a royal mess. Parallel to the court cases that were happening, etc., they're still happening. And amidst all of this, I used to sit down at night, spending nights reading up on EDH kya hota hai, what are the chances of Papa making it, and then with Janvi, my cousin, she's working from home. She left everything and she decided to just stay with me for almost a year. This girl never left my hand, and ordering cheesecakes, taking me out. I had a friend who, um, when he realized this has happened, and I was not around for 3 days, I was not answering my calls. He saw the post of the fundraiser. He realized that something like this has happened. He picked up his laundry bag, stuffed some clothes, some shoes, just drove to me from Gurgaon, and decided to stay here. And I asked him, why? What makes you do this? And he said, I realize that you don't know how to drive, and I know there's a cabs problem in Ghaziabad. If nothing, I'm going to drive your family around from home to the hospital and back. Things like those, things like my friends driving to get me brownies from Meerut, things like people traveling from cities to come see my dad just once. It wasn't just family, it was, I think it was the first time I felt that sense of community. People I wouldn't even call friends back in my MBA have now become family, right? So the things that everybody has done, the prayers, until today, it's been 3 years, I cannot tell you the countless number of people that keep checking in. So I think, we often speak of people are not good, the world is going downhill. I have seen the opposite side of it. I have seen everybody come together and show me how beautiful the world is and how there's actually goodness in the world all around. So I think that is also what motivated me to jump into this full time, and to maybe, if I can give somebody else that sense of community the way I received it, I think this is going to be worth the while.
You've, I'm getting very emotional listening to what you said, and it's a wonderful answer. The reason being that when I was detected with cancer, a lot of people told me that I should not be putting out the videos and posts that I was regularly talking about my illness, whatever their reasons were. And I completely ignored that advice. And what that did, amongst many other things, was open a most unexpected floodgate of similar comments and gestures from literal strangers. And changed, it changed a very innate cynic in me and made me see humanity for what it really is and the fact that it still exists in large number, a degree. So yeah, I completely see what you're saying. Mm, Now that you have a certain amount of, uh, let's say, time distance clarity, do you feel that in these kinds of situations, both your mum and you, or either, would have? I know that it was probably not possible at the time, but do you feel that it may be worth getting some kind of form of therapy or counseling now or a little later?
We've actually tried that. We've done that. I think the first time I was recommended therapy, and I was running away from it. Um, Not because of the stigma attached to it, not because of any other thing. I think I tried two therapists, and in all honesty, it did not work for me. I've also been told that finding the right therapist is almost like swiping on dating apps.
Oh yeah,
It
absolutely.
takes time for it to click, and it's not about the therapist. It's not about me. It's just about whether or not it clicks. It did not for me in the first two times, and I dropped the idea. My
Hmm.
mom was never too gung ho about the idea until September of 2022, some 8 odd months into whatever had happened. And I saw a coin sized bald patch right here. I was combing my hair. I saw it, and I didn't know why that would be, right? You don't often see something like this. Of course, I was terrified. I ran to my mom. She scanned through my hair, and then she tells me that there's one more here. It's this big. She clicks a picture. I called my aunt. She's a dermatologist. She's actually a plastic surgeon in Safdarjung. She called me to a hospital. We went to a dermatologist, and he tells me I have something called alopecia areata. And this is an autoimmune disorder that gets triggered usually when you're under immense chronic stress. That's when he recommended therapy. I tried to go back to it after that. But Karthik, and nothing against any traditional form of counseling, what worked best for me was support groups.
Yeah.
Um,
So, just very quickly, and I know we are coming into an extremely critical point. I should have clarified when I said therapy, or at least stated that I use that term very liberally and loosely and broadly, in that any kind of modality or practice or ethos of healing, it can include any and all alternative modalities as well. Because, of course, there's no one size fits all, and a lot of people find that talk therapy or traditional psychotherapy is extremely limiting and it has its limits to its efficacy, etc. So, any kind of, maybe even just becoming a little more spiritual, I suppose, anything that brings an individual who has undergone and endured trauma some kind of understanding and closure.
yes. And there's so much that you take back and learn from those who've been on a similar journey, right? It's also, I think the worst kind of question to ask yourself when you lose somebody, especially your parent, is why me? I've seen the best of us question that, right? I think what support groups, therapy, sharing circles have taught me is no, I cannot go on asking why me, because look at what the world is enduring. In fact, enduring is the wrong word. Look at what they're embracing, and look at how they're shining after they've come out of it, right? So, of course, when I was 1 year into my journey with grief, and I was speaking a lot to people who were maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years into their journey, I realized that this is a pain that I am not going to heal from. I'm probably going to learn how to live with it. And so from support groups, grieving support groups, I've also now moved to sharing circles. you know this is where people from all walks of life come together. Somebody is going to talk about a divorce, and somebody is going to talk about how they had the perfect life, but now they're 60. Their partner has passed away, children have moved on in their own respective lives, and they feel lonely. How I will share my story or what's happened with me, how somebody else will talk about their parents undergoing a divorce. And it's the sheer sense of community that you realize that, oh look, they look so happy on the outside, but look at what's going on in their lives. And it's just that sense of belonging, that sense of empathy that you feel after maybe one session. So I think from a traditional therapy where I was the speaker and somebody was decoding why what's happening is happening, I found home in just going and listening to stories of other people. And that's also why I decided that I'm going to start a storytelling platform and I'm going to conduct all of these sharing circles, because if this is how I feel when I attend a session, oh God, I have to make people feel this. This is something else, right? So I think that's really, really helped me feel good about life again.
That's that's amazing, and the power inherent in a sharing circle or a cohort or a group is immense. How did you discover it?
Oh, Shark Tank. I was watching one of the episodes of Shark Tank. I followed that thoroughly, and there was a startup that were doing something in that space. So I reached out to them. I attended a couple of sessions there, but that's an online space. And what I realized was that I want to be associated with something that's not that's that's an experience for me
Yeah,
to witness, right? So what I ended up doing was my dad was in a nursing facility in Gurgaon. This is after his hospitalization. So that place largely was an old age home, alongside which they had certain dedicated rooms for neuro patients who need intensive nursing care. So my dad was in one of those rooms. Of course, Papa could not speak and talk to me, and I would go there. I, along with my mother and sometimes relatives and friends, we go there often. These people had an evening ritual. So all the people in the old age home, and also they had a lot of young folks. I met a I met a lady who had lost both her legs to an accident, and she lived there, and she had stories to share of when she could walk. Something as simple as walking on our own two legs. We don't know how much value that is to someone who can't do it anymore and who's lived a life being able to do that. So, evenings there, my mom and I used to just sit and talk to these people. Everybody had their own stories of how they ended up in this facility, what their lives were before, how much they missed their children, how their partners were. We used to play Ludo. People taught me how to play better chess. I'm pretty bad at it. So I think that's when the sense of community, and I was like, okay, this is not a formal sharing circle, but what else is a sharing circle if not this?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So it started from there. And then I started visiting a lot of old age homes and NGOs around me after I lost dad. So I think that's where it started. And I also still join these sharing circles on that startup. They're doing some great work. Kudos to them. So that's how I was introduced.
This gives me an opportunity to shamelessly plug a support group that we started towards the end of last year, towards the end of 2024. Support groups tend to be very theme specific. And what if you don't belong to any of those categories of being using a particular substance or a divorcee or whatever? So we started something called the Driveway Devi Safe Circle, which happens every Tuesday evening at our office. It's a physical safe circle, and people are welcome to come and talk about anything under the sun that's distressing them, whether it's long term or short. So I completely appreciate and see the value in that. What I do want to check with you, and I suspect you've kind of in an indirect way answered it at least partially. Grief is a very intense and complicated emotion. It's actually not a single emotion, it's so many. And with it comes guilt, shame, and so many things. Have you begun to process your grief? And if yes, even if partly, how do you think you've done it? Has it also happened by uh, unplanned as an unplanned byproduct of these sharing circles that you've been attending?
Yes and no. And I think this is something that will keep happening in phases. That will keep happening in the smallest of the incidents. I think it started happening. And for me, grief started before losing dad. Grief started when, that whole year when he was in coma. So I think my first understanding of what has happened was, so I'm a talker, and I'm extremely close to both my parents, and I always speak of them in present tense. I still hate the feeling of referring to my dad being around in past tense. So I'll still say I'm very close to both my parents, and every time I'd come back from office, my father, and mm, if you know the kind of subjects that you have in engineering and MBA, those are fairly longish names, right? My father would know every subject. He'd know the name, he'd know the name of the professor. We would speak, we'd have at least 5 phone calls every day. All my friends were fed up. It was I think the relationship was such that if I'm out partying tonight, I saw all my friends not share that with their parents. I would call my dad and say, "You guys want to stay up because I'm going to be late. So you better ensure that I reach home because I might drink." So we were that close. So when Papa was um, comatose and he was not responding, and my office was in Gurgaon, my dad was in Gurgaon. I rushed from my office to Papa almost every day, and I would tell him everything that happened at work. So we had a full time nurse, and I'd ask him to step out, and I would share everything with him. Just the fact that my dad's not responding, and I'm whispering into his ear, and it's not the same. And this time, when I'm sharing all those stories of why my manager is not a good manager and why this XYZ did not share lunch with me today, Papa's not saying anything. And it started then. Uh, I also, my dad's palm used to be really warm, and I used to sleep on my papa's palm every time I was home. And I saw it become colder, literally, and also metaphorically, over that 1 year. And I think that's when I started processing grief. And now it hits us in ways when, my mom tells me, Papa, I used to do this. Who's going to do this? We didn't know there's so many things that he does around the house that he never let my mom bend and pick up the bin ever. And now she's having to do it. There's so much that he used to do that when we do every time something, did something yesterday, and that was the first time I did it. And my mom said that, "Ye to Papa karte the." So every time that, we are still reminded of him. There are so many times that, in fact, when you reached out to me, and I've just begun my journey, I still run to my dad's picture in my bedroom and I share everything with him. So I think talking to him has helped. Maybe that has helped me process my grief. I'm also very scared of maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line. What if I forget his voice? What if
Yeah,
I
so
forget?
that's those are precisely the things I meant, which is what makes grief so complicated, because there's anger, there's denial, there's the fear of forgetting, there's all kinds of things.
Yeah. I think, and the worst emotion that I struggled with for the longest time was why me. That's behind me now. I don't think of this as, I mean, this is not, my competition with the world. I was the chosen one for the wrong reasons, and so be it. But I think that was a really difficult emotion. Then feeling that, oh, my mom's on her own. I left my hometown when I was 18, and I've always lived in different cities. And now I look for reasons to come back home and stay here because I know my mom's literally alone. So that sense of guilt when she's here and I'm in a different city, that's also happened. I spent almost a year in Bombay. This was a year back, a little more than a year back. So, battling that guilt that mom's having to do life on her own. My mom stopped walking after this happened with dad. So she held a cane and now suddenly she needs a knee surgery. We got that done 6 months back. Figuring everything out right from the hospitals and knowing that, oh my God, am I responsible for my mom's surgery and her knees? And am I having to pick the doctor up now? Nobody to take those check-in shifts with me at the hospital, staying there every night. All those things, they actually teach you the value of family, the value of people who are around you, and then suddenly they're not. And I think this is something that I'm gonna have to live with. I'll probably keep processing the guilt in ways I still don't know. Maybe when I marry somebody and I see my husband with the children, maybe that's when I'll start missing what my father was to me, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Wow. Okay. I had a quick clarification because I don't know, somehow this is unclear to me. When you at the beginning referred to your then manager, who sort of, took you through this entire thing of what finances might look like or pan out as in the foreseeable future, I didn't quite understand whether you saw that individual as a helpful person or not.
No, no, he was, Karthik, have you met those people who are extremely blunt and brutally honest to your face, but they mean good? He
Mm.
was one of those. He was one of those no bullshit guys who'd spit truth bombs. So, he could have actually, and you really get a very low rate of interest when you take a personal loan from the organization that you work with. What he told me is, Puri, tomorrow if an opportunity comes your way, which gives you a big bump, right? And given the financial situation that you're in,
Yeah.
you would want to take it. You want to be tied down by this loan. A, B, how are you going to repay it? Because up until now, your dad was running the house,
Yeah.
right? My money was just bank money. I was never using my money except for my trips that I would take often, right? He's like, now you are going to have to be not only the provider for your mother and your house, right from groceries to anything and everything, you also don't know how long your dad is going to be in the nursing facility, right? And the kind of outflows there's going to be to take care of him, and that could be as long as 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. So taking care of that, which was anyway more than my then salary, taking care of and running your house because now the business is shut. My dad's not going to work. My mom's a homemaker. And then taking care of yourself in the house in the city that you live in because you have a place of work which is not Ghaziabad. So I'm literally running almost three houses, for the lack of a better word, right? It's like, how are you going to do all this suddenly alongside repaying for this very heavy loan that you're taking? You're going to be in a debt cycle for life, and there's no coming out of it. And his dad was bedridden for almost 3 years then, if I remember correctly. So he knew the realities of what happens when something like this comes to family. So he's like, right now, I and my brother are taking care of Papa. You're the only child, and you have to remember that. So he suggested this, and my cousin that I mentioned, and that friend would come with the laundry bag. He happened to be there. The three of them and I, we were sitting in the hospital and having this conversation. So that's when my cousin and my friend decided that we're doing this, and they did this.
Yeah, I'll tell you the reason I sought that clarification was specifically because we are also talking in a recent backdrop of a lot of criticism that the corporate sector, by and large, has come into when it concerns, the work culture or lack thereof, I suppose, and things of that nature. So I'm just terribly relieved to hear that you had this understanding person. Okay, finally, then on to positives. Before I ask you about the human diary, I want to ask you from this entire phase of unimaginable melancholy and sadness, what have been some lessons for you?
Wow, I think the first that comes to mind, and I've also slightly mentioned it. Actually, no, I've mentioned it. Is the power of community and how there's so much goodness still left in the world. That's I lost Papa, and that's irreparable. That loss, that lacuna nobody can fill. But the number of people, friends, and friends who become family that I now have, having trying to come out of it, right? That's something that I never imagined. The
And
power
I think
of
it's safe to assume may not have happened. I mean, God, may not have happened if things hadn't worked out the way they did.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Because these are people whom I knew back in my first school or back in my engineering college, and suddenly these people are checking in on me even today. When I started this, and Karthik, I recorded my first video, had it in my phone for 3 weeks because and even today, I've had this rough phase of the last 1 week when I'm really scared of putting myself out there and posting, right? And then people from all over these institutes and my organizations, and you said things that we often speak of and hear of in the news about corporate, but people from both my organizations that I've worked with, they've been reaching out asking when am I sharing my next video. So the sense and power of people being so empathetic towards me is something that I have really gained. Also, a lesson that I've learned, because people often talk about how the world is going south. I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. That's one. Two, I, I people who are friends with me know this. I cannot stress on this enough and more. Please, oh please, get yourself the best health insurance that there is for yourself and your family. I have learned it the hard way. I have learned it in ways I don't wish upon anybody, not a soul. So honestly, thinking 10 lakh is enough in 1 year, no, it's nothing. It's loose change. It's peanuts. It's nothing. So I have done it now for myself and my mom. I recommend it to anybody, to the point that one of my really close friends came to me. This was 2 years back, and she's like, "My mom's retiring, Poorvi. I want to get her a nice retirement gift. What do I get her?" And I'm like, "What kind of insurance do you guys have?" She mentioned an amount close to 10, 15, 20 lakh. I don't remember correctly. I'm like, no, get the best health insurance that you can. So that's been a great lesson. Anybody watching this video, please do that.
Great lessons, very practical. Okay, human diary. That is how I began this interaction, and it's only fitting that we bookend it with this most beautiful and positive birth that is taking place as we speak. Why, what, etc.
So Karthik, one of the days, and I've started reading a lot in the last 1 year, and I was reading about this movement. Was it in Germany? I don't. Please don't come running after me if it was in Germany. But there was this movement. It was called the Human Library, right? Back in the 70s, I think. And this was a room where people would sit every evening and others would come in and borrow these people for an hour. And this is basically borrowing time of another individual. Now, you would see 5 year olds, 10 year olds interact with 60 year olds, and people from all walks of life. And the idea was that every person is a book in themselves, right? That's why this movement was called the Human Library. And this is how this idea of the human diary came to me, because I felt that there's so much that we could write in our diaries if we were to. I don't know how many of us journal today. I recommend it, but I don't think all these deep innermost thoughts, long term and short term issues, like you mentioned, that you address in your sharing circles, right? We don't often sit down and talk about those with ourselves, let alone share it with the world, right?
Absolutely.
But I feel like every human still is a diary in themselves. And if they were to come and just talk about, not everybody will have a problem to speak, right? What if I'm talking about grieving about my father or my insecurities because now I'm starting up and I've left a well paying corporate job? Somebody else will just come in and say, life's good, it's my daughter's birthday.
Hmm.
But yeah, I feel nice talking about how they celebrated it, right? So I think we're all diaries, and I want to build a platform where I share stories of all people. Stories of them choosing an offbeat path, stories of them just going about life in a very conventional path, but being very happy with it. Stories of anything and everything, because that's what we learn from. That's the human experience, right? So from my sharing circles and support groups, I want to build a sense of community, and from my social media, I want to convey to the world that we're all diaries. Let's please come together and share our stories.
That's wonderful. That's so so beautiful, and um, I should definitely be featured on one of your whatever you do with it, because I don't know too many other people who are as unconventional as I've been in the Marwadi scheme of things.
Wow, it'll be an honor, 100%. I'm going to start
Uh,
pestering you to send me your footage, and I'm going to feature you in one of the stories.
But just to play devil's advocate, I must quickly ask you that, Instagram has an oversupply of so many people essentially dispensing gyan. And so, how do you intend to communicate that you, amongst this ocean, are authentic, real, etc.?
Honestly, Karthik, I have spent so much time trying to answer this question for myself, and I realized that the best way to show the world how authentic I am is just to be authentic.
Yeah.
People who want to know will know. I just want to do my honest work. It gives me happiness. Today, it doesn't pay my bills. Tomorrow, I know it will. And I'm hosting my first ever sharing circle on parenting this Sunday in my society. And I know a lot of parents are going to show up. So I'm just going to be talking about it on my Instagram. People are going to see how honest that work is. If they see merit in becoming a part of the family, I am going to be super happy. And if by any chance, if it doesn't benefit some of them, that's also perfectly fine. The idea is not for me to bombard myself and show that, listen, there's so much happening, but I'm the best. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. It's for people to decide. But the intent with which I'm building this is just good intention, trying to spread smiles and happiness in the world, because I know we're all aching, we're all grieving in different ways, in some form or the other.
At the
So,
cost of being a bit silly and immature, that is the right answer. It's almost as correct as like a pageant answer. No, but joking aside, that is really the only way to be real and authentic, and people see through that. I mean, see that, and they see through the BS, and they see what's real and authentic.
come
Uh,
on, Karthik, when you're watching reels, right, you know it. When it's authentic, you know it. When it's not, you see through it. So, I
Absolutely.
don't think I'm going to have to try hard to do that.
Absolutely. Wonderful. It's been great catching up. And what would also be absolutely wonderful is, again, at a certain point in the future, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year hence, even, to do a sort of follow up session to see where you're at, where things are. I think that'll be lovely because I suspect there'll be another journey, a much more pleasant one to talk about. So well done, good on you. You're very, very inspiring and moving. Stay real, stay authentic, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Karthik. I'd love to do that follow up session and also love to really feature you in one of the stories. So there's a lot more catching up. And
Wonderful.
thank
And
you.
you
Thank you.
and you keep coming to Jaipur, so
Yeah, of course. I'd love to be a part of one of your Tuesday sessions.
great. Take care.
Take care. See you. Bye bye.